From Trapped to Triumphant, one woman's escape from a gilded cage. The air in the Croft penthouse apartment, perched high above the glittering, indifferent sprawl of London, always felt recycled. Sterile. Like the orchids Julian insisted upon, magnificent, yes, flawless, certainly, but devoid of the heady, chaotic perfume of their jungle origins. Elara Vance, or rather, Elara Croft as the world knew her then, often stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, tracing the paths of headlights far below, feeling less like a resident and more like a rare specimen displayed under glass. She remembered soil. Real soil. The dark, loamy earth of her grandmother's garden in rural Devon, clinging under her fingernails after hours spent coaxing life from stubborn seeds. She remembered the rough-spun wool of a Connemara fisherman's sweater, smelling of salt and peat smoke, bought on a solo backpacking trip through Ireland long before Julian's world consumed hers. She remembered the hushed reverence of the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, the weight of centuries pressing in, a feeling infinitely more substantial than the airy, minimalist spaces Julian curated. These memories were her anchors, reminders of a self buried beneath layers of silk, expectation, and the crushing weight of Julian Croft's ambition. He was, by all accounts, a titan. Julian Croft, CEO of Croft Global Industries, a man who carved canyons through markets and bent economies to his will. His suits were armor, his smile a calculated negotiation tactic. He had collected Elara much like he collected art. She was aesthetically pleasing, possessed a certain pedigree, a sharp intellect honed at Cambridge, a quiet grace that offset his own brashness, and reflected well upon him. He loved her, he claimed, with the same possessive certainty he loved his market share. Tonight was another of those evenings. A curated gathering of the powerful and the sycophantic. The clinking of ice in heavy crystal glasses, the murmur of deals disguised as conversation, the scent of expensive perfume mingling with the aroma of meticulously crafted canapés Elara herself had overseen. She possessed a quiet flair for hospitality, a genuine warmth that Julian leveraged, smoothing his rougher edges. She moved through the room, a perfect hostess, her smile practiced, her observations sharp. She saw the flicker of fear in a junior executive's eyes as Julian made a cutting remark disguised as a joke. She noted the brittle ambition in the gaze of a rival's wife. She stored these details, filed them away in the mental archive she'd been building for years. Her grounding came not just from memory, but from action. Discreetly, using burner phones and encrypted channels, she managed microloans to female artisans in Rajasthan, a project started with a small inheritance. Her grandmother had left her a small inheritance, fiercely guarded from Julian's controlling finances. She corresponded with an old professor, discussing obscure historical texts. These were lifelines, whispers of the woman she still was beneath the polished surface. Julian found her near the windows, overlooking the Thames glittering like scattered diamonds. He didn't touch her with affection, but with assessment, his hand briefly on the small of her back, a gesture of ownership for the room to see. "Darling," he murmured, his voice smooth but carrying an undercurrent she knew well. "Senator Davies is raving about the Powsin. Your touch, naturally. I merely suggested the truffle infusion, Julian," Elara replied, her voice calm, betraying none of the frantic calculations whirring beneath. "Chef Antoine deserves the credit." "Nonsense. You elevate everything." He smiled, but his eyes were cold, scanning the room. "Did you speak with Nakamura's wife? About the Tokyo bid?" "Briefly. We discussed the upcoming cherry blossom season." Elara kept her gaze level. She knew what he wanted. Insider information gleaned through feigned feminine solidarity. It repulsed her. "Charming," Julian said dismissively. "But find a moment later." "Subtly, of course. Her husband values her opinion." He squeezed her arm, just slightly too tight. "A reminder. Don't forget whose name opens doors for you, Elara." That was the spark. Not a dramatic outburst, but that casual, crushing reminder of her perceived dependency. He saw her not as a partner, but as an asset, a tool. Years of swallowed indignities, of quiet compromises, of watching his casual cruelty towards those he deemed beneath him, it all coalesced into a single, cold point of resolve. Tonight. The planning had been meticulous, spanning months, leveraging every trip abroad, every carefully cultivated contact, every bit of knowledge gleaned from her studies and travels. It was time. The party wouldn't wind down for hours. That was her window. Her escape wasn't a midnight dash with a suitcase, it was a multi-layered strategy designed not just to free herself, but to insulate her from his inevitable, furious pursuit, and, perhaps, lay the groundwork for a future he could never touch. Part: the escape. Executing the plan. While the party continues, Elara makes her move. This involves digital extraction, accessing specific, encrypted files she's prepared, not necessarily damaging illegal info, too risky for her, but evidence of unethical practices, broken promises, perhaps internal communications revealing his manipulative nature towards partners or employees. This is done remotely, routed through servers in different countries she visited using burner devices. Financial severance. Activating the transfer of her own protected funds, the inheritance, may be carefully siphoned personal allowances disguised as household expenses over years, to an account under a different identity, set up meticulously using legal loopholes and international banking knowledge. It's not about stealing his money, but reclaiming her independence. Physical departure. A decoy car service booked earlier. A pre-arranged rendezvous point away from surveillance cameras. Using her knowledge of the city's backstreets, perhaps from earlier, simpler times or deliberate exploration. Maybe a change of appearance, simple clothes hidden away, ditching the high-profile jewelry. The farewell, a single, encrypted email scheduled to be sent to Julian after she's clear, stating her departure clearly and unequivocally, perhaps hinting that any aggressive pursuit will lead to the release of the unflattering information she possesses. It's a checkmate move, using his fear of reputational damage against him. Close calls and tension, navigating out of the building, avoiding specific security personnel, perhaps a near miss with a returning guest. The tension of the digital transfers completing. The finality of walking away from the opulent life. Part: laying low and the spark of reinvention. Finding sanctuary, not a glamorous hideaway, but somewhere deliberately low-key. Perhaps a modest flat in a European city where she speaks the language fluently, Paris, using her alternate identity. Maybe she connects with one of the artisans she supported remotely, finding temporary, unexpected community. The aftermath. Elara monitors the news cautiously. Reports of Julian Croft's sudden separation. His controlled narrative. His initial, likely private, fury and attempts to locate her hitting dead ends due to her planning. Intellectual reckoning and healing. This is where her well-studied nature comes in. She doesn't just hide, she processes. She reads, studies, perhaps volunteers somewhere that reconnects her with her grounded side, a library, a community kitchen, an art restoration workshop. She reflects on Julian's methods, his arrogance, the hollowness of their life. This period showcases her resilience and intellect, turning trauma into fuel. Identifying the new path. Her experiences, the appreciation for craftsmanship, from her artisans, the understanding of high-level business, from observing Julian, but rejecting his ethics, her own intellect, and perhaps her travel insights, converge. She identifies a niche. Example ideas. Ethical luxury consulting, advising brands on sustainable sourcing and fair labor, directly countering the exploitative models Julian might use. Bespoke cultural curation, creating unique, high-value travel or art acquisition experiences based on deep knowledge and personal connections, appealing to a discerning clientele tired of the ostentatious. Architectural design for accessibility and well-being, combining aesthetic sensibility with a focus on human-centric design, perhaps inspired by a personal connection or observation. This has strong potential for admiration. Let's choose this one for stronger narrative impact. Part: the ascent and the social revenge. Building anew, Elara, under her real name now, perhaps legally reclaiming Vance, founds her firm, Vance Design Atelier, or similar. She starts small, leveraging her intellect, her genuine passion, and perhaps one or two key contacts who admire her integrity. Showcasing intellect and gaining admiration, her designs are innovative, beautiful, but fundamentally thoughtful. They incorporate universal design principles seamlessly, proving accessibility is luxury. She writes articles, gives talks, initially small, then growing. People are drawn to her quiet confidence, her deep knowledge, weaving in references to historical architecture, sustainable materials, psychological impacts of space, her well-studied background, and the stark contrast to the cutthroat world she left. The social revenge, subtle and strategic, this isn't about public slander. It's about outshining and exposing by contrast. Winning key projects, Vance Design Atelier starts competing for tenders. Initially smaller ones, then prestigious projects, museums, public spaces, high-end residential developments focused on well-being. She wins because her vision is superior, more ethical, more forward-thinking than the established, perhaps complacent firms, maybe even ones Julian has connections with. Highlighting ethical practices, her firm's ethos is transparent. Fair wages, sustainable materials, community engagement. This implicitly highlights the rumored, or perhaps now subtly leaked via her old files to investigative journalists, poor practices at Croft Global. Becoming a thought leader, as her reputation grows, she's invited to speak at major conferences, write op-eds. She talks about ethical leadership, sustainable futures, the importance of human-centric design, all implicitly rebuking Julian's model without ever naming him. The admiration for her becomes undeniable. Julian's awareness, he becomes aware of her success. Initial disbelief turns to fury, then perhaps grudging, and fearful, respect. He sees her name linked with projects he might have once coveted. Part, reversal of fortune and vindication. Julian's decline, as Elara rises, Croft Global falters. The unethical practices she documented start to surface. Whistleblower reports, perhaps emboldened by Julian's weakening position. Employee lawsuits regarding abuse, discrimination, or unsafe conditions gain traction. Bad press mounts. Key partners distance themselves. His empire, built on shaky foundations, starts to crumble. He becomes increasingly isolated and desperate. The tender, a major, highly prestigious international project, is announced, designing a new cultural center of forward-thinking urban development. Both Vance Design Atelier and a subsidiary of Croft Global and a company he's heavily invested in are finalists. Elara's pitch focuses on sustainability, community integration, and groundbreaking accessibility. Julian's side relies on old-school influence and cost-cutting. Elara wins. Her proposal is lauded as visionary. She wins the tender, a massive, public validation of her approach and a significant blow to Julian's remaining prestige. This success is far beyond anything he achieved in terms of positive impact. The plea, Julian, facing ruin, lawsuits piling up, his reputation shredded, finally breaks. He contacts Elara. Not with threats, but with desperation. He needs help, a loan, a partnership, perhaps even just her public endorsement to salvage something. This scene needs to be powerful. Show his broken arrogance, his inability to truly comprehend how she surpassed him ethically and intellectually. Elara's choice and resolution, this is her moment of ultimate power. She doesn't gloat. She doesn't offer him salvation. Drawing on her grounded strength and hard-won peace, she calmly, firmly refuses. Her response isn't vengeful, but factual. Their paths diverged, his issues are of his own making, and she is focused on building a better future, not salvaging his broken past. She says, "My work is about building accessible futures, Julian. It's not about propping up collapsing structures built on poor foundations." She ends the call, not with malice, but with finality. Final scene, Elara is perhaps visiting a completed project, maybe a center for independent living where her designs have genuinely improved lives. She sees people using the spaces, thriving. Maybe she receives a message about the first shipment of mobility scooters funded by her foundation. There's a sense of peace, purpose, and quiet triumph. She hasn't just beaten Julian, she's built something meaningful and lasting. The sky above her is wide open.